All right, welcome to the Fortify Your Data podcast. I'm here with JJ DiGeronimo. Is that correct?
That is it.
All right. So you do a whole bunch of things. You've written books. You do a lot of keynote speaking roles. You seem to always be traveling for one thing or another. You run Tech Savvy Women. Is that correct? So. You can say it certainly better than I can. So just give us a little brief history on your background and kind of how you came to be doing what you're doing today.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I've been in tech since '93. I started in the telephone companies and then quickly migrated to data centers, which I spent most of my career. But in the sort of early 2000s, I started getting promoted to bigger and better positions. At the same time, I started a family. And I think just trying to manage everything happening at home and global teams, it was complicated. And I think the whole having it all really set me for a loop, because I think what many of us strive for is sort of checking the boxes and getting to a particular level, and you find out that there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. And I started Tech Savvy Women in 2008 to just bring together like women in tech that were hitting on all cylinders but could share ideas, strategies, and create a safe space to empower each other. And that really was the launching pad for my first book, The Working Woman's GPS, which I documented and categorized all the information I gathered from women not only in tech but in medical and many STEM disciplines. And I took that conversation on the road. And so while I was at my last company, I spent much time talking to many women's groups around the country, which I realized that women were really struggling to get promoted, finding the right sponsor, effectively networking, and getting to that C-suite. And that really was the catalyst for my second book, Accelerate Your Impact.
Yeah. And that book came out in 2016?
It did.
Okay. And since then, I think that's that's been kind of the catalyst behind a lot of your recent speeches, talks, keynotes, right? Tell me a little bit about what that book's really about.
So it's interesting because I spent over 2 decades in corporate America working my way up, and I was really struggling to understand, why are many women in middle management? Is it because they don't want to be there? Are they not qualified? Or the various other stories you hear in between and in the media. And so I spent about 3 years researching data that talked specifically about why women are where they are in sort of the organizational chart. And I was shocked because while I was so busy doing my day job, I didn't have the bandwidth to really do that type of research.
Sure.
And there are so many ways that women show up differently in the workplace that we are completely unaware of. And even as being a woman, I was unaware of. And had I had a little bit more data and research that was research-based, I could have made more strategic decisions and alignment that probably would have helped me further my career at a faster pace had I had that in my back pocket.
Okay, and so somebody would grab this book if they wanted to understand some of the dynamics and maybe accelerate their progression in that kind of corporate hierarchy?
Yeah, it could be corporate. I call Accelerate Your Impact instead of How to Get Promoted.
Sure,
because
sure.
Impact means different things to different people. Some people want to get on a board, people want to launch a product, some want to get to that next level of their career trajectory. So whatever your desire is, you can use the information in the book to help you strategically align, position yourself to gain the momentum you need to get to that next level of impact.
So that's interesting. How do you gauge, on a more personal level, how are you gauging your impact, or what are your goals for your impact?
That's a great
right?
question. And I think this took some soul searching on my part. Because when you're in corporate America, titles and salaries matter. When you go out and work on your own to do good work, sometimes you don't always get the same level of title and necessarily the same amount of money. And a couple of years ago, somebody brought to my attention is to get rich on the energy you create. And I think that for me, the work that I'm doing really helps people unleash potential, gives them permission to go further or go now rather than waiting to be 100% perfect before they raise their hand or fill out the application. And the calls I get, the emails like, I did it, I went for it, I wasn't going to do it, I got the job, I'm on the board, that is super sweet.
So now, when you're going around, are you looking at this from more of a general leadership focus? Are you looking at this from more of a tech focus? Obviously, women in tech is an overlying theme, but are you really, now you branched out? Are you really just talking to everyone?
Luckily, I have the opportunity and the invitation to meet many companies, from credit card companies to car companies to engineering, medical devices, healthcare, tech, because the concepts, the research, the data is really applicable to professionals and really people. And I think that for many folks, my groupings really fall into women that aspire to do more than they're doing today, men that are looking to create more thought diverse teams and inclusive environments to match their customers, and students that are looking to get the insights and sort of the inside track on how to make the most of their career.
Okay, so let's look at it this way. So let's say I'm a man that's looking to diversify his company, right? What are some of the first questions or the first suggestions you would make?
What type of diversity do you have today?
Okay, well, it's a tech company, so mostly white men.
Why do you want diversity? So outside of just being a global goodness of your heart, most people have to align a business value. So some people want to do it because they're customers. They want to look like their customers. Some people want to do it because they want to be more innovative. Diversity creates more innovation if done right. Some people just need to hire more people because they can't find what they're looking for in the comfort recruiting they've done to date. So I always say, like, let's start with the business reason, because if you can measure it, you're more likely to monitor it, rather than just saying, hey, let's do it and try to do it. So once we get the business value down, then we really take a look at how do you recruit today. There's probably 21 things you can do in your recruiting to really help you get more diverse candidates. Everything from how you write your job description, where you put it, what your interview teams look like, and how you position opportunities.
So like, what are some examples of that?
Yes.
This is I'm not immediately attaching myself to this.
Yes.
So like, what are some things I could do recruitment wise that might attract diversity?
Sure. So women, from research, women only apply to jobs when they're 100% prepared. Men generally apply at 60%. So if you have a 3-page job description, guess how many women you're going to get?
Fewer than men.
Right.
Okay, interesting.
So I always say you want to condense your job description.
Yeah.
You want to group it into must-have requirements, nice-to-have, transferable skills. And then also data around, we're really looking to build out our diverse team. If you have a percentage of this, we'd be interested in talking with you. And so that inviting language. You want to make sure you use the proper language, like if you're using alpha star, rock star, unicorn, rainbows, you're probably not going to get that many women, because women don't categorize themselves as superstars, rock stars, alpha dogs.
Sure, yeah.
So the language, NCWIT, the National Center of Women in Technology, has a list of words not to use in your job description, which I often refer to.
Is alpha dog one of those words?
Alpha dog is one of those words, and rock stars, and unicorns.
Yeah, maybe I'm out of touch. I haven't seen many of those, but if some job required me to be an alpha dog rock star, I'd apply for that job immediately.
You would?
Yeah, is that the job title? Or is
it
that
could be, but like women are like, I don't want to let anyone down.
I guess that makes
sense.
It.
So, I've just done a phone call before, we talked today, and, generally my friend's getting interviewed. She's an executive in the finance industry, and the first question is, what does your package need to look like? How much money do you need to make?
Yeah.
That's not the first conversation women want to have. Women want to know, can I pick up my elderly parents twice a week for what they need to do? Can I, have some flexibility in my schedule? When I travel, what are the requirements? Like, women have a lot of things going on in their lives. When they change jobs, they basically change their whole life. When men change jobs, they generally just change the location they go to, because they don't have as many responsibilities outside of work as men do, as women.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of single parents, so I don't want to overlook that. People are not married, some people don't have children, but a broad stroke is women run 80% of what's happening in their home.
Okay. So that this brings up a lot of points that I will be honest, I have not thought of much.
Great.
That's
great.
As a tech leader, and shout out to my day job, Bluebridge Networks. We recently hired a marketing person, and that process was traumatic. for me, and just in terms of finding that person. And I'm guessing that based on this conversation, there were at least 21 things that I did wrong.
This is great though, because a couple of my friends who work in Silicon Valley, where I spent much of my career, I say women build up a lot of social capital in the company they're in. So they take a lot of thought before they move to the next company about, are they going to get that flexibility if they need it. Now, oftentimes they don't even need it, but they just want to know that if they have to run out or they have to do something in the morning, that they're not going to be dinged by it. And you know, tech is so many hours. Like, we can all appreciate the things we have to do outside of work, and I think just making people feel comfortable that when they do make this transition, that you'll help not only with the onboarding of the technology, the messaging, the brand, but the onboarding of how they have to change their life to meet the new demands of this job.
Yeah, so I mean, that kind of bleeds into a big problem that tech has in general, which is work-life balance. And from my experience, there seems to be two kind of philosophies. There's one that's probably a little more popular, where it's, you live here, you know, so we're going to make our work environment awesome, but you are expected to be here, like, the whole time. You know, we'll give you a daycare, we'll give you this, you know, we're very progressive, but, you know, you're salaried, we anticipate you working 16 hours a day. Obviously, some of that is a little lighthearted joking, but that seems to be the kind of gist. And then I've also been to some places that are here, hey, you're here for a paycheck, get your 8 hours, get in, get out. But that doesn't always work well from a coverage standpoint, especially if you're a mid to small sized company. What do you see, I guess, more, since you're a little more well-traveled, what are you seeing in terms of the trends of like work-life balance in tech companies?
That's great. Well, I think I'll start with why people stay at companies.
Sure.
So people stay at companies because they feel like they belong. They feel like there's a bigger purpose to what they're doing, and that there's a career trajectory for them. It doesn't have to be immediate, but over the next 36 months, there's opportunities should they continue to do great work. So I think keeping those in mind as a leader is important, and then realizing that there's always going to be that project deadline, that customer cutover, that migration. That's going to happen throughout the quarter, throughout the year. But when there's not those types of things, giving people flexibility is often helpful, because they do have to get some of the stuff in their life done so that they have peace of mind when they're at work. And so I think for leaders, it's really important to know your people, know what they need, and sometimes you need to sort of kind of customize a little bit. And I think one of my biggest lessons for leadership is saying yes is just as important as saying no. And leadership is about having that balance of things we're going to say yes to and things we're going to say no to. Because I find a lot of tech companies say yes to many, many things and just deplete their teams.
Yeah. So, well, and that's interesting too. When you look at your career history up till now, what do you see as the toughest leadership role you've had, and why?
So I think some of the toughest leadership roles I've had is the ones that change every quarter, where you really just can't get your legs underneath you because the leadership above you isn't clear on what they're trying to accomplish. And so they're constantly changing the decks and the goalposts. And I think those are the hardest leaders to work for, because generally, to me, that means the leader is unsettled and probably doesn't have a lot of leadership experience, because good things often take time. And if you keep changing, whether it's the projects, the customers, the ways you're going about your products, what you're going to market with, every 3 months to meet the needs of their leaders, it creates a lot of chaos and burnout.
And so where I was kind of going with that too is, so I've worked in a corporate environment before where you know, the boss only has a direct feed into the people that he has directly reporting to him, but then they have direct reports and they have direct reports. So in that kind of framework, when you're trying to interact with people, even as like an outside vendor, you're noticing that each leader can only influence a tiny section of it. So if you are, let's say, 3 hierarchies up, how do you influence all of those people? How do you know your employees?
I mean, it really comes to making the time.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down. I mean, it doesn't take much to swing by, have lunch with a certain team, get a roll-up of information per team. I think being too busy often gives people permission to be detached, and then they can point the fingers. But real leaders know what's happening at various levels, and maybe not every intimate detail, but they make the time. They make the time, and they empower their leaders too. And I think There's, many situations where you work for people that are great at managing up, but not so much at managing down.
Okay.
And that can be challenging for teams, and you can generally see that if you have high turnover.
And so how can leaders empower women in tech?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So first and foremost, understanding the statistics. I think understanding that women wait till the time they're 100% ready to prepare. So having some one-on-one time with your high potential, diverse candidates, and some of the ones that you want to be high potential, understand their career goals, understand what's happening in the whole realm of what they're working on, and then giving them strategic projects that not only give them the experience and the stretch opportunities, but from some executive visibility. So project allocation is really instrumental on fostering talent. And oftentimes, way projects are divvied out, it's like, okay, well, you do this, you've always done this, and there's a real opportunity in project allocation. And then talking about career paths, women want to know that there's an opportunity to add more value, and so talking about potential ways to do that. And the beautiful thing about that is that women don't expect immediate turnover or action. It could be a 36-month timeline, but at least they know somebody has their back and someone is mentoring and sponsoring them for rooms they're not in and giving them sort of the highlights of what they need to do to make that happen.
Yeah. So you've interfaced with people in smaller cities, mid-sized cities, small companies, giant enterprise companies.
Yeah.
Is this more of an issue in anywhere in particular, or is this pretty uniform? Are the statistics the same all around, or is Silicon Valley more diverse, or is are the Midwest more diverse?
I think the beautiful thing is all the folks I get to meet throughout a year, tens of thousands of people, is people want to do good work. They get up every day wanting to put their best foot forward. And I think the most important thing is people want to work for managers that care about them at some level, that it's just not about the deal or not about the product at launch, that they genuinely care about their teams. And I was fortunate enough to see Jack Welch a few years ago, and when I asked him about diversity and leadership, he said, be the best manager you can be, and you're never going to have to worry about talent because people are going to want to be on your team. And so I think it is a leader by leader situation, regardless of where you are. There are good people, there are good leaders, there's bad people and bad leaders. And I often see people mid-career and higher looking to work for good people because they feel like that's even more important than the work itself.
Sure. Yeah. There's a little inspirational / maybe not inspirational meme that goes around LinkedIn pretty frequently. That's people don't leave their jobs; they leave their bosses.
That's
right?
true.
So.
That's true.
Yeah, that definitely feeds into it. So when we're looking at getting more like women involved in tech in general, right? So this is actually a problem that we have here at Fortify Your Data from the podcast side of things, is getting more female guests.
Yes.
Because it's hard to find them. It's hard to get them on. I've also noticed that if you take like a pool of people, at least that I have approached to be on the podcast, women are more likely to not agree to it, or at least need more data, before they decide to jump on or not. Whereas statistically, a lot of the men I've approached are like, yeah, pick a time, I'll come on down right now. I'm like, well, let's talk about what we're going to talk about first, right? So like even in this situation, but if I look at all of the, if I'm trying to find tech enthusiasts and tech leaders, there's the profound amount of them that I find on the internet are all men, right? So how do we get more women in kind of those roles, or how do I find more of these women to talk? Because I think that the more women you have talking, right, in some of these more prominent roles, or at least out there, then the more women are going to kind of jump in, right?
I completely agree, and it's very similar to even recruiting is, use the women that you already know to help you recruit.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's just like, well, do I have time for this? Am I the best person? What would I talk about? And even when TEDx started, they asked 10 men and 10 women, and 9 men said yes and 2 women said yes.
Yeah.
Women are always like, why me? Am I ready? I think someone else could do it. I don't think I'm the best person. We have this self-talk that we pay probably a little bit more attention to.
Sure.
And the women that actually stand out and step out often have more self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is when you have a vision for what you want to do and believe you can achieve it. And you can only do that if you stretch before you're ready. So if you have a lot of women playing it safe and waiting till they're 100% prepared, they generally are not going to step out and say, oh, I can figure that out. And so when you look at women in tech, by the age of 35, 56% of the women leave.
Yeah.
So the women that stay often have high self-efficacy.
Sure.
Because they've been put in situations where they're not sure they can figure it out, but they've trained themselves that ultimately they're going to get it done. They're going to pull it across the line. So a great way to get more women involved is to ask women. Like, I will give you 3 women that you can interview, and then ask other women that have been on, or even people that you work with on a regular basis. Hey, I want 2 or 3 women that you would recommend. Because I feel like I would have a better understanding with tech savvy women of other women that would say, oh, sure, I'll do that. Where it's sometimes a little bit difficult if you're just kind of looking out at the sea and saying, oh, is there any women?
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. I actually just, I open up the doors of my house and I yell that, and then, then I hope that somebody shows up. But I guess that's fair. I'm definitely, like me personally, I'm definitely a ready, shoot, aim kind of guy. Where it's like, can you do this? I'm like, I'm sure I can figure it out. What is it?
High self-efficacy.
Sure, if it, is it jumping out of a plane? Or can you fly? I'm like, we'll try it, right? I could drive a car. What's the difference? But as far as
well, I would just say too is women. Women sort of feel grateful to be in the industry, and so we don't often want to take too much of a risk that we could possibly screw up, which I don't think is the right approach, but generally happens more often than other because we work really hard to get at that table, and a lot of us are like, gosh, I want to be valuable. I want to provide a lot of impact, and sometimes it's just nerve-wracking. And men feel that way too.
Yeah, I could see that, and I think that a lot of the people that are hesitant to jump on a podcast, for example, are afraid of saying something stupid. Which is funny because I'm on the podcast. So.
Me too. That makes two of us.
Yeah. I guarantee you there are many stupid things I've said so far, and there will be more. It happens. It happens. It's a numbers game. If you talk too much, eventually, dumb things will come out. But so back to where we were at. If I'm trying to look at what roles in IT women are attracted to, is there some common thread? So, out of personal experience, and I have not anecdotal evidence, not real evidence. I notice a lot of women kind of gravitate towards developer roles. At least locally, the people that I've met, I see very few women in routing and switching roles, for example, or telco. But when I do see women, they're like, "Oh, you're a programmer, you are not even necessarily like UI design, things like that."
Sure.
Is there a trend that you see there, or?
Well, it's interesting. Harvey Mudd, which is a large educator for women in tech, computer science, those such things, they actually went back and reworked the titles of their programs because through research they learned that women want to have a bigger impact to what they're doing. And so they made it more global in nature. And so they, instead of just computer science, they said computers that are going to help mankind, or they have all different titles that they use to attract women because women want that altruistic value beyond what they're doing. So if they're working at a hospital, talking about how many lives they're saving or how much medicine they're getting to the patient sooner, anything that you can tie a bigger value to seems to lend more towards women and the way that they think. And so talking about money, quotas, number of deals, pipeline, none of that apply. Women are completely disconnect from all those words. Because it's like a grind, it's a number, and if you talk about how many lives you're saving or how you're getting information to people sooner so they can make these types of decisions, you generally can pique at least the interest.
Yeah.
And I mean, programming is programming, whether you're doing UI or a router, from a router girl, but I think it's positioning. A lot of it is positioning.
Okay, so if you say, hey, you're going to sit in a dark room and configure ASA firewalls all day, that's probably not the way to recruit.
No, but if you said, hey, you're going to sit in a room and you're going to protect children from data that could negatively impact them in 35 schools.
Sure. So that's, okay, that makes sense. Again, things that I have mislabeled because apparently, my recruiting efforts are...
And it just takes a little more thought. And I think the bottom line is men and women show up differently. They think differently. Sure. And both have value. Both have the same types of smarts, But overall, we have different. And that's the value of inclusion and diversity. And when you have different people at the table, how you're able to create a more inclusive messaging system, inclusive products that handle both genders and even different ethnic and diversities.
That makes sense. So when I look at, so at least locally, and especially when I'm traveling around and looking at events, there are a lot of events that are geared for women in tech exclusively. Like, hey, you know, this is the women in tech event. What is your take on those? Do you like those? Obviously, I think that there's definitely a place for them, and I'm certainly not opposed to them. One time I showed up and I was the only guy, and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have been here. You gotcha, right? So do you think that kind of those things are helping, or do you think they're isolating? I guess is
That's a great
question.
Well, one of the reasons I started Tech Savvy Women in 2008 is because I would attend all these CIO events around town and in the region, and there were just 5-6 women.
Yeah.
But then when I would go to the corporations, you know, I'm like, where are all your women? Women are so busy doing the work. And I always say, you know, you need to get out, you need to network. The opportunities to get together with like women in a small group that's safe research shows is very productive and can be very helpful and actually help women advance throughout their career because they have sort of that safe space. But the reality is women need sponsors, and sponsors are generally people that have social capital that you don't have, and those people are generally 1 and 2 levels above you. So if you're only going to those events, you lose the opportunity to meet strategic people that could help open doors for you or put you on a short list that are generally men. And so what I tell women is you need to have sort of more of an advisory board of resources that you call on, that know who you are, what you're trying to accomplish. Some of them have to have social capital to make connections for you or recommend you for a role. And so I encourage women to get out more often than they do and be strategic about how you network.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because again, like on one hand, totally think that there should be kind of, you know, women in tech events that are those safe spaces for women to kind of share their ideas. But I also see that we have a lot of those events, particularly in Cleveland, for example, and I never see any of those girls at any of the CIO events or any of the other summits. So there has to be some kind of cross-pollination of ideas, and that's the part that I get concerned about.
Yes, and so what I say for IT managers, IT directors, CIOs, bring 3 women with you.
Yeah.
Bring 3 women with you. Like, you're their boss, bring them with you. Because you have to have a succession plan for some of these folks, and it's great because they generally get the work done most of the time, which is fantastic for the organization. But I often get those calls, you know, we were acquired, my boss left, they're outsourcing the IT team, what should I do now? I said, my first question is, what does your network look like?
Yeah.
People who are always doing the work and not working on on the network that helps support from where they are and where they can possibly create impact next. It's difficult to jump quickly when you're always doing the work.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you're somebody with a really strong personal brand. Do you think that is harder, or is just kind of counterintuitive to the general mindset that most women have in tech, where they don't necessarily want to build a strong professional personal brand? Because I feel like that's one of the things that drives me, for example, to go out to some of these events.
Sure, and have the podcast and all the great work, the book. You know, I feel like sometimes when I hit post or put something up, I'm like, oh, jeepers, oh my gosh, why did I do that?
Yeah.
It's nerve-wracking.
Well,
it's not easy to put yourself out there.
It's not fun either.
To your point, I make mistakes. I say the wrong thing. I make a fool of myself, but I believe in the bigger work that I'm doing, and I think that's what pulls me through, because if I take myself too seriously at any one point, I probably won't come out of the house.
For sure, yeah. I think that there's not a month that goes by that I don't post at least one cringy thing.
Right.
You know, or at least it's cringy to me, and other people don't see it that way, because most people just want to see you're doing something. They don't, they care more about the overall objective, right? They don't care about the tiny mistakes, and there are many.
Oh, and people will tell you too.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll call you, they'll email you, and you just cannot take yourself that seriously. And I think having a bigger vision for what you're doing and believing in that will help with all this little stuff that doesn't go right, because the list is long.
Yeah, for sure. So, any advice for women listening to this podcast now?
I think if I had to give advice right now, is do something different this week. Get out of your office, take somebody to lunch that's 1 or 2 levels above you, reach out to someone you admire, read some books or articles, put some things on Audibles, find ways to empower yourself differently than you did last week.
I love it. So We have a little bit of time left to plug anything you want to plug. Tell us about any events you're doing. Tell us what's next for you.
Sure. So I appreciate it. So some of the fun things that I work on is I have an online course site, which I'm starting to create more of, and how to find your mentors and sponsors, because this is so tricky for so many professionals of how to do the right thing and how to find people that are actually going to help you rather than just take you for coffee all the time. And so I just launched an online training with 4 specific courses to build the mentors and sponsors that help you create the momentum you desire. So that's great, and you can find that on techsavvywomen.net.
Okay.
And then I'm starting to do overnight retreats for professional women, get them to network with new women in different ways.
Like cabin retreats or?
Houses. We rent
Okay.
houses, hire chefs.
Okay.
We bring in yoga, and we do a lot of great discussions around career and impact and desires, so that you got to step out of your everyday routine sometimes to think about bigger activities and alignment. So I think techsavvywomen.net has all of that data, and then they can connect with me on LinkedIn, of course.
For sure. We'll have both of those links on the show notes for both audio and video. So yeah, that's what we had today. I really appreciate you taking the time to come down here and talk with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. It's so great to have the opportunity to talk about ways to integrate more diversity in tech. Thank you.
For sure, and I will take you up on your offer to give me leads on more women to jump on the podcast.
Happy to do so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.